Welcome to Jewish Midlife. Hi, I'm Devora Krasnianski, your host. I had such a great conversation with Jeanne Blasberg where we dove deep into the idea that as we age, we often become braver and more in tune with who we truly are. Her kids were grown and out of the house, and she was ready for her next adventure. Her passion for making a real difference led her to make some really gutsy moves in her midlife, like swapping Boston for a farm life in Wisconsin and writing not one, but three books. She's all about living life to the max, trying new things, meeting new people, and embracing every stumble along the way. Listening to Jean talk about her journey from feeling discontent to bravely trying new things is super inspiring for anyone trying to figure out their next phase. Here we go. Jean, I'm really excited to be talking to you. I'm so glad that Allison introduced us because you have such an interesting life, what you're doing now, and I really want to unpack and talk about all the different aspects. So let's talk about you.
Okay, I'm so excited to be here too. First of all, thanks for having me on your podcast. So, I am a 58-year-old mother of three grown adults who more or less are doing great in the world, thank God. And I feel blessed that I have this space. I have my health, I have some resources, I have a great relationship with my husband. We made some changes in the last 5 years, really sparked by COVID, I would say. Uh, really kind of looked at each other one night and decided we should do something to really, I don't know, make more of a difference in the world. And we sold our home in Boston on Beacon Hill, which freed up a lot of my space because I was like the property manager taking care of this 200-year-old home. And we decided to buy a farm in southwestern Wisconsin, based on the fact that a family friend lived in Madison, Wisconsin, and was interested in becoming a farmer. And well, we wanted to buy a farm regardless, but Matt, the reason why Wisconsin was because we had this friend who wanted to move from the kitchen as a chef to being more involved with the food systems on a farm, had some farming experience, and also had a good relationship with a fast casual chain of restaurants that would become our primary customer and partner in this enterprise. So I'm year 2 now as CEO of Flynn Creek Farm in Verona, Wisconsin. We grow 26 different varieties of vegetables for forage kitchens. And if you picture, a lot of people are familiar with sweet greens, which is kind of our main competition. But you go through a line, there's some pre-made or options on the menu, but you can make your own salad and with a grain and some protein. And we're providing the greens and the veggies on that assembly line. Albeit in Wisconsin, we can't do it 12 months a year for forage, but we're in the process of putting in greenhouses and figuring out the technology to further extend our season. So that's actually really cool. But yeah, so I've been doing that. And then 10 years ago in 2017, I published my first novel. So this was way before the farming enterprise. And it's called Eden. And it took me a really long time to write it. So I've been a writer for many decades, but my first novel came out about 7 years ago. And then shortly afterwards, my second novel came out. But that's only because I was working on both novels there towards the end in parallel form. The first one, I thought I could never finish it. I put it in a drawer. The second one kind of came out like a ball of fury. And so after I went back and got the first one published, my publisher encouraged me to get another book out right away. And I said, I actually have one in the hopper that I think's pretty good. And so that I was able to publish The Nine 2 years later. Um, the Nine came out in August of 2019, and it was doing really well. COVID hit, that next winter, and my kids all came home, and, just like everyone, there was this disruption, this confusion, a lot of loss, a lot of upset, and a kind of a reassessment of things to keep my life and my routine going, I was continuing to write. And my latest novel, which just came out this week, includes COVID in it, not with no surprise. But the finishing that book, kind of people say, like, how did you do that and start the farm? How did you write a book and start the farm? Well, the secret is that the publishing queues are so long. The book's been finished for a while. Probably has been done for over a year, and therefore it kind of dovetailed nicely with my transition to the farm. But yeah, so other than that, I'm an avid athlete. I love to ski. I play a lot of racket sports. But primarily, I guess the common theme is I like to create things, and to and I appreciate the outdoors and, a healthy lifestyle. So
So you have a lot of, so there seems like there was like in the last 10 years, you've done a lot of changing. And I want to talk about that because I think for midlife, there's a lot of people that whether life kind of propels them to make the change or like you kind of had a little bit of both, it sounds like,
yeah.
or you make that assessment yourself. Like midlife is a chance for whole new things. Did you ever think you would be a farmer?
No, although we have had a very bountiful vegetable garden at our home in Rhode Island. It was a summer kind of weekend retreat, and we'd go down there from the city in the summers, and I would just grow so much in terms of veggies that it was like all my family really needed, and I was sharing with all my friends. And the there's whether you're growing acres and acres of food or growing just your small plot, when you're able to like feed your family and share with your friends, it's an incredible sense of joy and accomplishment, or not really accomplishment because nature is the one, creating this food. But I don't know, that little spark of joy of sharing the food really is the seed. I was like, if I could have that joy on a grander scale and all the time of feeling like you're providing or nurturing, or not just that, but you're giving the people the opportunity to have like really healthy food, because what we're doing on our farm is repairing the topsoil and creating a regenerative system that uses no chemicals. And so it's just like really, really healthy food that regionally, you just typically wouldn't have access to at a low price point, because the forage kitchen salad bowl is like a $10-12 item. So it's not like our consumers need to be like 1% high-end restaurant diners. It's really accessible to everyone. But going back to making the change, I guess like I guess as you get older, you get a little braver and a little bit more, hopefully, in touch with yourself. I feel like all the stages of my life were amazing, but I landed, I grew up in Southern California. I went to college in New England. I met my husband. We've lived a lot of different places. When we lived in Boston, we lived near his parents, and I feel like, in a way, I created a life there that was amazing for raising my kids and being close to my in-laws, their grandparents, and we had such great multi-generational times. But when his parents passed away and his parents passed away and my children left Boston without really a sign of wanting to come back that often, I was left maintaining this big house like it was a museum to the life we used to have. And I just assessed things. I was like, first of all, maybe that kind of Beacon Hill life, it was great, but it wasn't like truly me. It wasn't like I felt like I'm gonna stay here for the rest of my days and they're gonna be taking me out in a coffin. Like, I didn't have that love of just living in the city for the sake of living in the city. I've always loved the blue sky, green trees, finding beautiful horizons, hiking, and I'm truly happy when I have more readily access to those types of things. Um, and it became noticeable even when we traveled how much happier I was when I wasn't in Boston. So that's not to say I don't love my friends in Boston and miss them and visit them a lot, but there was something about like I was really in touch with how much my mood changed when I was other places that allowed me to be outdoors a lot. And so, we just made that change. It might seem like a big change to have then bought a farm, but like I said, I feel this responsibility of being fairly young still, healthy at my age. I don't have a lot of family obligations aside from me and my husband. My kids are doing great and I can contribute something to the world. So like I don't just want to sit on a beach or play tennis all the time or whatever vacation. I want to work. I want to write. Um yeah, I want to be an active part of a community trying to do something. So even though we had no ties to Wisconsin, it felt like that was the type of town where everybody's like working hard and pulling together. Agricultural communities are really amazing.
I want to go back into the whole assessment. Like, personally, like like slow it down. Like thinking about like that you liked your patch, as you called it, but that doesn't translate into moving to Wisconsin. And then you also said that you chose to be brave and like just do it. And then recognizing that Boston had its time for you. Like, can we go back, slow down that assessment? It wasn't like an
Sure.
overnight, like, how
No,
did that work?
it isn't. I think a lot of people, maybe a lot of women can relate to feeling this feeling of discontent or dissatisfaction, or you just don't have the excitement to get up out of bed. And maybe you think it's a slight depression, or maybe it's just you're in a rut. I think it kind of coincided with COVID for me, and I had to like sit with myself and figure out what is upsetting me that's not due to the state of the world. And like, I think during COVID, our family chose to be in our house in Rhode Island and not be in the city. And so the redundancy of that home and kind of the superfluousness of maintaining it, things started to become clear as we just sat with it. And um yeah, it's hard. Like sometimes it's hard to know where that discontent is coming from. But to make a change and maybe make a gradual change, like we ended up spending more time in the West and not in our home in Boston and renting places. I mean, this is a luxury because my husband and I were both able to work virtually during the pandemic. So we could leave Boston and experiment with how that made us feel and how we could stay connected to our friends and connected to the city in a way. But um, so yeah, it did happen gradually. And there was this epiphany where it was like, I just think I want to live in a different place. That came gradually, but then when you make you sell your house and move, it's like there is a little bit of oh dear, what am I doing? I want to just back up though, because my situation, and I don't want to say that anybody can't do what we did, but I'm an only child and my mother passed away 20 years ago and her family lives all over the place. My father is remarried and happily living in Florida with his new wife. And um, when I was growing up, we lived in a number of places. We lived in New York and we lived in California. And then I went to college in Massachusetts. John and I lived in Cincinnati. We lived in Europe for a while. I guess and my parents, when I went to college, they moved to Texas. So I spent some time in Texas. I feel like there's like this double-edged sword. I never felt like my roots were that strongly established in one place. And that sense of wandering, made me, I think, is one reason I felt really attracted to my husband's family, and that they were so established in this one neighborhood. And all of a sudden I like belonged somewhere when I became part of that family. Um, but I guess I have this muscle inside me that knows that I can show up with a passport and a credit card and maybe a little spending money and be able to kind of land anywhere and do okay. So I went through this process of downsizing and selling a lot of the things that were just stuff that were kind of being housed in that Boston house. I started to just really try to simplify the things that we were involved with, whether it was like associations or boards or organizations that kind of counted on us. I just really, it was about a 2 or 3 year process of kind of downsizing and simplifying in preparation for this change. But I guess I'm just trying to say I'm the type of person who's pretty comfortable in my own skin. I like spending time alone. I grew up spending time alone. I spend a lot of time writing my characters on the page. So I can kind of be planted anywhere, and I find people really interesting. So even though I'm an introvert, I also think I love trying new things. I have this beginner's mindset. So it's keeping us young in a way, because all of a sudden we're planted in this new place. And even though we're the strangers in town and people are looking at us like, who are these crazy East Coasters thinking they can grow vegetables in Wisconsin? Um, I all of a sudden have that like excitement of that young girl starting her first job. It's that um so it's a trade-off. I sometimes I look at people who have their roots in a place and have a big clan of a family and have um such a sense of belonging and tradition, and I envy that, but that's not what I have, so I'm able to bounce around a little more.
So I love that idea of the beginner's mindset, and I do want to talk about that. But the idea of knowing that you're discontent where you are is one thing. So I want to move away from that, but choosing where to move to is also, I think, it's a separate part of that. And so, how did you get to Wisconsin? It sounds like you like the idea of nature, but we have a lot in the United States, and you're comfortable in Europe too. So, how did you
Yeah.
choose Wisconsin?
Well, this really was a passion born around a business or a yeah, wanting to try regenerative farming, which is really an ancient indigenous way to farm, where you have livestock in combination with crops, and you have pollinators, and you have some forest, and everything in the system works together so that you don't need to bring in outside amendments and chemicals and fertilizers. As in the beginning, we need to use organic fertilizers as we're getting going, but eventually we'll have this holistic system on our farm that's producing and actually regenerating and improving the soil. And this type of farming is, I'd say, it's no people are no stranger to it, um, in like Vermont or the Hudson Valley, areas closer to home in Connecticut. Farming in a way that produces organic food um, to fairly affluent people is something that we were living among. But we decided, as we were doing some drives during COVID out west, there's so much farmland that's dedicated to corn and soy and a kind of a monoculture rotation. And there's so much land that's not cover cropped and topsoil that's vulnerable to erosion. If we really wanted to make a difference, we should be in the Midwest. And so this led to a search for a farm in the Midwest. And then I mentioned this family friend who raised his hand and said, "Hey, I'm in Wisconsin and I really want to be a farmer." So we started visiting Wisconsin, and specifically the Driftless region southwest of Madison. And oh, it just broke every stereotype I thought about the plains of the Midwest because there's rolling hills and rock formations and rivers and lakes and streams, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So in addition to being able to kind of serve this experimental farming mission that we had, it was a place where we started loving to spend time. My husband and I like to just ride our bikes on the road. We're not like big competitors or anything, but it's such a beautiful rolling hill environment, and it's like such an iconic um, place where there's all these like 150 acre dairy farms and beautiful barns and silos, fields of different crops, and yeah, rolling hills and lakes and places to go kayaking. So Madison is a super cool place, and it's also a huge foodie culture. So like we lived in Switzerland for a while, and I would even compare Madison to the same culture of Switzerland when it comes to like the local food system around dairy, and also just eating what's seasonal and fresh and eating what's local. And it felt like a natural place to kind of start this. And again, the relationship with Forage Kitchens was a huge reason we went, because I didn't think we were going to be spending our Saturdays at farmers markets or managing a huge customer list through a CSA. This kind of vertical integration with a restaurant chain is something fairly unique and a cool opportunity. So we felt like everything really came together. And, when you kind of open yourself up to a change, you have to really also be in tune to the signs of what's working and where you're being directed. And I think things really came together for us in Verona, Wisconsin. It's not to say we have not had we have had plenty of challenges, but for the most part, the critical things that we needed to put the whole plan together started to show up for us there.
We came with this beginner's mindset, and I think that for me, I find that there's a whole world now that I have a little bit more time to explore and to be part of, and I find it so fascinating. And plus, the world, it has changed from when I used to didn't have time, and so this beginner's mindset of like, what? Why not? Let's try it, and like, hey, maybe I can incorporate it into my life, or maybe not. But just trying it, I think, expands the horizons, expands the mind, expands the opportunities, and expands my network of people. So I just
Yeah.
love the idea of beginner's mindset.
I think the last 10 years, I don't know, you're probably a lot younger than me. You start to lose people, you lose friends, you lose family, and you realize you get one chance on this earth. I think it really hits you in middle age and as you're getting into your 50s and 60s. And again, it's that I better do it now. I don't know when something could happen that could sideline me or make me have to take care of someone, or right now is no better time. I mean, nothing hurts, and I'm healthy and I don't have anything I need to worry about. So shame on me if I'm not making the most of it right now. One thing that we did talk about before I think you started taping was the beginner's mindset and trying new things just as a daily, or like just as a practice in your life. It could be as simple as learning a language. Like I do 15 minutes of Spanish every day on my app on my phone. I've been doing that for about a year because I was determined to be able to communicate with people who work in agriculture, whether they speak English or Spanish. And if I'm going to be in agriculture, I need to be able to speak Spanish. And I was mad at myself for not holding on to my high school Spanish. It could be as simple as learning how to play bridge or a card game that opens avenues to, working your mind and meeting new friends. It could be any type of thing, but I think we get resistant to feeling stupid and feeling new at like trying new things because that frustration you have when you're first trying something new isn't pleasant. Um, But there's something amazing when it comes to the that first breakthrough. And I think a beginner's mindset is important because it keeps us humble. I mean, we're all really good at certain things, but so is everyone. And we have to realize that we're also not so good at things, and having, trying new things is a way to constantly be humble. And I have entered into this farmer's life as a true beginner, and I have all this humility, and I've surrounded myself with people who know what they're doing. I think what I bring to the team is that I'm good at managing people and overseeing a process. I might not understand like all the technical things we need to do on the land, but I'm pretty good at like setting a schedule and checking in on people and kind of creating a culture of teamwork. And so anyway, that's just with relation to how a beginner's mindset might work on the farm. Um, I started this practice maybe 20 years ago of taking 30 days and trying something new. So 30 days is kind of a long period of time, but it's really not in the scheme of things. But it's just long enough so that if you try something for 30 days, it almost can become a habit if it's something that really like works for you. But if it doesn't work, you're like, well, I'm only trying this for 30 days. So fine. One summer I said I was going to swim in the ocean every day for 30 days. One month my husband and I decided to go to bed every night at 9 o'clock and wake up at 5 for 30 days. And you just use those extra 2 hours in the morning to either meditate or do something creative, but just to have it for ourselves. And that actually was awesome. I wish I could hold to that, because it's sometimes your social life and your work life makes it hard to go to bed at 9 o'clock. What else? We went gluten-free for 30 days. Everybody talked about how being gluten-free really made them feel different. And I don't know, it didn't make me feel that different, but it was worth trying for 30 days. No alcohol for 30 days, vegan for 30 days. I wrote a letter to a friend every day for 30 days. There's all sorts of things, but it's a way of treating your life like a laboratory, whether it has to do with diet related things or how you want to structure your day. If you want to meditate every day, try it for 30 days. If you want to walk every day after dinner, try it for 30 days. It's, I think our human nature is that it takes about 30 days or maybe 21 days to create a good habit. And so that gives you long enough to decide, is this something I want to incorporate into my life? And I was just talking to my husband this morning. My whole day has turned into a series of things I've decided to integrate into my life. And sometimes it feels like I've created this routine that's so structured and rigid that I don't like to do anything except for my regular routine, and how that might be kind of holding me back. But if you think about turning your life into a series of sacred rituals that really make you feel elevated, it's a different, I don't know, it's a different approach. So I think as I'm now getting towards my 6th decade, I've added a lot of things and I've let go of a lot of things. And you can kind of think about your life like you're curating the perfect version of yourself, or what makes you feel the best. And I really believe in living as intentionally as possible, because I don't know, again, we only get one chance, and
Right.
I want every day to be the most it can be.
I love the idea of 30 days because even if it's not working so well, it's like, okay, we only have 14 days left, only 13 days left. It's like manageable. Unless it's really,
Right.
really difficult, and you can, I guess it's just between the two of you, you could really say, okay, we're not going to finish this 30 days. But it
Well,
sounds almost like a game. Like we can
well,
do
also,
that.
speaking on the Jewish angle a little bit, yesterday I was in my Torah study and we were talking about the symbolic nature of 40 days. And it's like there's certain periods of time where you have to give something for it to fully bake and mature before you make a decision. the rabbi was saying there are people who come to a class and after a week they're like, this isn't for me. And you have to say, no, you have to give it 4 weeks. Like, and then if it's not for you, fine. But sometimes the brain resists things in the very beginning. Sometimes it takes like an aha moment that doesn't come until day 21, like this slight modification. But yeah, exactly like you said, 30 days, it's not the end of the world. If you're going to be vegetarian for 30 days, big deal. It's like 4 weeks, it's 4 weekends, you'll get through it. If you didn't do the experiment, what would you have done for those 30 days? You would have just lived your life the way you always did, and the time would have just flown by and you wouldn't be able to look back and remember half the things you did anyway. So why not try something new for 30 days?
Also, you have a story to tell. We try the month that we tried vegan and it was wonderful, or it was just like, whoa, that's how other people live. Like it doesn't really matter. I find it the whole game, it sounds so playful. And like
Right.
and I guess I'm even imagining the conversations of choosing what's going to be these next 30 days. Is it going to be no alcohol or no gluten or just the options on the table? It just sounds very
Exactly.
exciting. Like
Yeah, it was. And I don't know. I think, you've inspired me to get into that mindset again. Um, whether it's like I'm going to make this smoothie every day for 30 days. And I don't want to say it has to be all diet related, because I really did love the 30 days when I wrote a letter to a different old friend. And I actually wrote a letter and I had to find their actual mailing address and go to the post office. And, I would have fun picking out different cards at the stationery shop, or what, like, note cards, or what stationery I was going to use. That was really fun. Um, or whether it's I'm going to read a classic novel that I have not read, and I'm going to read one chapter a day for 30 days, or I'm going to read 20 pages a night for 30 days, or I'm going to read 20 pages before I go to bed so I don't fall asleep. It's going to be like during the day, sitting up in a chair. I'm actually going to put my phone away in a different room and I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to work on my watercolors every day for 30 days. It's like a gift to yourself.
I just
It's
see
kind
that
of like you're
like
playing a
mind
trick.
expanding. Just like just the
Yeah.
options, thinking about the options means that there's so many things that I can still explore in the world. And then choosing the 30, and there's only 12 30s in a year. So like when you have this list of 60 things that I could try, and I'm only going to try 12, but I could try the other ones too. Maybe not for the 30-day
You'll
experiment,
be
but
going for 5 years, Devora.
there's so many things. This world
You
is
will
so
just,
exciting.
I know. And to think of all the things that you could accomplish, you might decide, I want to learn such and such language. And you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm fluent in Italian. I wouldn't have taken it on as seriously if I hadn't held myself to like the 30-day routine. So I know people who say they've written a book in 30 days. I don't know. There's just like so many things that you can experiment with. It depends on what your set of interests are. But um,
But you did it
I
with your
think
husband, so you had that accountability. You had that let's do this together. That that's you can do it with a friend or with your husband or with your child, with one of your children. It's
yeah,
the idea for myself is new beginnings and new experiments, and I think the accountability buddy really does help with them.
it does. I'm lucky that my husband and I have a similar spirit, and that it's not like one of us trying to move in a direction and the other person's like, no, no, let's not make any change. This is fine. I mean, especially when it came to like selling our house and moving to the farm, I was really at this moment of feeling unhappy and dissatisfied with the way things were. And I think we've been married 34 years. I think one pitfall that could have happened was that I looked at him and I'd be like, you're the problem. But we looked at each other and we were like, let's grow in a certain direction together and try something new together. And I just feel so blessed because it is easier to do something with a partner. Um, or if you're single and you have already no partner, it's probably easier to do something. The hardest thing might be is if one person's not up for the adventure or the change. And so I just thank my lucky stars for this relationship we've created, because it has enabled uh, it has enabled us to, yeah, do some different things.
It's like you totally
Like
reinvented yourselves, both of you, setting up
yeah,
a sick kids.
so let's talk about that word reinvention, because I like it and I also don't like it, because I think at the core inside of me, the light that's inside of me is the same it's been since the moment I was born. But I'm like figuring out what it is a little bit. I'm like discovering more than reinventing. I'm like getting to the authentic me more than I'm changing who I really am. I think it's self-discovery. And that's not to say at different stages of my life. In my 20s, I loved living in New York City and kind of this, and then I loved raising my kids in Boston. But um, yeah, there was just like that wasn't doing it anymore when I got into my 50s and the family wasn't around. I was like, what am I doing here? So it's discovery and a
Yeah.
little bit of reinvention and a little bit of self-discovery.
Yeah, I also have the same feeling about reinvention. I think that we reinvent this surface of what we're showing to the world, but ourselves,
World.
our core is really the same, just being able to use it differently or manifest it differently. And for some of us, or for many of us, it was covered. We were so busy doing for our family, for others, for what expectations. And I think that midlife is a time that we really can bring it more to the front, which it may look like we're reinventing, but it's really shining who we really are.
I totally agree. I think there's nothing more satisfying when thinking like that light of who you really are and the manifestation of how you're spending your time are more in line. Um,
Yeah.
and I was this creative soul running around making dinners, doing carpools and loving my children, but feeling like I was kind of putting a little bit of my own self on hold for other people. And yeah, so it's not a reinvention because the world might have thought of me as like this mother and housewife, but inside I was a novelist. And so when people said, "You've reinvented yourself," I'm so proud. I'm like, no, I've been sitting in my house writing for the last 20 years. Nobody's seen it.
Right. And I find that this time is so wonderful, this midlife when there's a little bit more time to reflect. We're not doing the laundry anymore and or as much laundry and carpooling. And carpooling is not just carpooling, it's all the arrangements behind it that you don't even think about how much time and energy and who do I want to go with and who's really on time, who's not on, like there's so much that it's I'm so glad to be finished with that.
I
And
tell
now I
you,
have time and mind space to actually think about what's next. And I love that what you said earlier, and I think that I want to go circle back to that, is you wanted to do something for the world, not just when you said we're talking about not just going to the beach or things like that, but really doing your next big thing for the world. And I think that's a really good guiding question of we're young, we're healthy, we have the time to do something good and wonderful, and not only about me and swimming and beach and even traveling, which I think is wonderful. I think there's time for all of it. But your guiding question, I think, was so important.
yeah, I think that those are some of the values that we tried to raise our kids with. Um, And, we had to look at ourselves and say a lot of friends at this age are seriously investing in their leisure time and their recreation. Like, and that's great, but I don't think that's going to do it for me. And if I feel like I'm going to be living on this planet and wanting to be productive for the next 30, 35 years, I feel like I have other gifts that I can still give. And even if it's in a really small way on a certain small community with food and some topsoil that's in a little plot in southwest of Madison, maybe we create something that other people are inspired to replicate and we kind of become part of a movement. That would be amazing. Maybe we don't. Maybe we just impact the lives of the 10 people we employ on our farm and our surrounding community in the state of Wisconsin, and the people who are eating our food are benefiting. Or maybe it's just like the healing just healing the acres that we are stewarding right now from having been soy and corn rotation, and we kind of regenerate the earth and bring some livestock back on and improve the grass. I don't know. I don't know what scale the improvement's going to be. We have a lot of ambition, but you can't do anything big unless you kind of start small too. So we just needed to do something. You know what's cool? I think we have these 3 kids. They're in their 20s. One just turned 30. You would think they're like, what are you doing? You guys are crazy. But they all look at us and say, Mom and Dad, we're so proud of you. And, we all need people holding us accountable, like you said, but to raise kids with certain values towards being productive in the world and then to be continuing to live those values ourselves, I think that just feels really good for me. Yeah.
I think that the idea of doing for others, it gives us, I mean, for me and for the literature says, it gives us much more satisfaction, and that we're doing, and we're leaving a legacy to the world, whether it's your topsoil and healthy eating, and maybe it will be a movement, but you're doing something for somebody else, and it's whatever it is, and hopefully will grow into something wonderful. Because I think the idea, I mean, I'm just intrigued by what you're doing, and I'm just wondering for yourself, like 10 years ago, did you even know what regenerative farming was all about? And the language, and it just flows off your tongue. Like there's a whole new part of you, and you get so excited talking about it. And
Yeah.
and the idea
Well,
of giving. I just think that there's a whole new part.
when I was a little girl, I think I wanted to be a scientist. And I got swayed away from math and science because I had bad grades in high school in chemistry. And then I went to a college that didn't require you take, uh, you could just take whatever classes you wanted in the areas that you were good at. So I stuck with the humanities. But I always have had this like little problem solving, scientific, experimenting love. And working with nature and being a farmer is every day is like a science experiment, and it's really, really cool in that way. Um, and then I want to go back to something else you said. I think it has been scientifically proven. I'm going to actually say that with whatever authority I have, that service, um, however you want to define it, but service is the best medicine. Um, Helping other people, spending time with other people, connecting, serving your community or whatever outlet that's kind of altruistic, that's outside yourself. It's an antidote for depression. It's an antidote for loneliness. It's the way I think we are meant to heal ourselves, both in nature and in like doing good for other people. If you have a chance to do a little good every day, I think that's just a blessing. So as you talk about like reinvention and new beginnings, incorporating something that's outside yourself, I think it's just so, I don't know. I think it's really important for the soul and our self-esteem.
I think that when we're planning our next steps, I think a big piece of it should be what can we do for others. So those who have families and are still very involved in the families, the kids are more local. There is
That's
doing for others,
important.
doing for family. But
So important.
and I think that's wonderful for those who actually have that. But
Yeah.
as long as, to me, and to, again, like you said, the studies show, and anecdotally, doing for others is a big part of what we
Oh,
could be doing
Devora,
in
let
these.
me tell you, when my kids find partners and have kids someday, I'm going to be all over those kids and that family. I will be the grandmother who babysits and does whatever they need. But in the absence of that right now, and so that I don't drive my kids crazy and hover over them and nudge them too much, having this outlet of, writing novels, farming, all the things that I do as an individual and that John and I do as a team, it's just so healthy for us. But yeah, we're in this stage right now where there's no sign of any of our kids settling down and starting, like, we don't even really know what cities they'll end up in full time yet. So we are in this like window of opportunity that we really recognize it's a point in time that we should take advantage of this.
I think it's so really cool that you're really doing this whole new thing of farming. And so I'm imagining you meeting lots of new people. Well, you moved to a new city, but new types of people because you're in a whole different
Oh, let me
industry.
tell you, the people in Wisconsin are so nice, but there's a certain subtext and like um and a certain nuance to the way they communicate. And my East Coast, like overexcited, talk really fast, like enthusiasm doesn't always sit well because first of all, I'm the outsider and a newcomer, and so you have to be humble and listen more than you talk. Um, there's this thing that you might have heard called Midwestern nice. I've like figured out what that's all about, where nobody says anything negative, but in the way they say positive things, they really are saying negative things. So you have to like be a figure that out slowly. And then there's just there's certain ways of being and communicating that even though it's the same country, we're all in the United States, it's like moving to a complete foreign place where you have to slow down, listen more. If you interrupt somebody even slightly before they finish talking, it's like the biggest offense ever. So I've had to really slow down and not jump in and talk when I'm excited to say something. It's just been a big learning process.
I think that learning process part is really exciting about midlife. I mean, you're learning a ton. I mean, there's the social nuances, but the farming and yourself. And so like I just find that whole thing so exciting, but it's also wonderful to do it with friends or new friends. And you're lucky that you have your husband so really in tune with your new beginnings, your new learnings. And I'm sure there are those challenges in those new beginnings and new learnings and humbling. I find that so fascinating that you take this humbling piece. So like, and that's just part of it. And you even seem to embrace the humbling part.
Oh, you have to. I think if you're a newcomer and a beginner at something and you act like you know more than you do, there's nothing more off-putting to other people,
I know
right?
that as a learner, you're not learning as much. I mean, learning is partly listening.
I have a neighbor in Wisconsin who has 5 children. She birthed all 5 of her children in her house.
Oh, wow.
She raises animals. She's out on her tractor every day. She knows the name of every weed and how to eradicate it. She literally is driving around in her tractor in the middle of the night to watch the full moon. She hunts deer. She dresses the deer. She feeds her family all winter long on the meat that she's killed. I mean, like
We're not in Boston anymore.
I was like, oh my God, if I will never know in my pinky half the things you know about how to survive and how to live on the land and just how nature works. It's so inspiring. How can I be anything but humble in the face of somebody like that? You know what I mean? It's just incredible. The people I'm meeting have so much knowledge about so many just really basic and cool things about animals and animal husbandry and the grasses and the lands and the weather. And I just absolutely am trying to soak in as much as I can from my new neighbors and every book and webinar I can also get my hands on.
Yeah, and I just see in your face, if those who can actually see you, that how excited you are about this whole new phase and all this new learning and these new people. It's so inspiring because a lot of people don't get that opportunity or don't allow themselves the opportunity, don't even think of it as a possibility. And you thought it, made it happen, and loving it. So good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a certain type of person um that made it a little bit easier because of my lack of roots, but it's not that anybody can't do it. I think we live in an age, for better or worse, we have internet connections, we can stay in touch with people, we can travel easily to go visit people, and we can try new things gradually so that you're leaving a slight door open, like you might want to visit someplace for a prolonged period of time or rent something, before you decide to like sell everything you own and move. Like you can dip your toe in the water a little bit, especially if you feel like we did, that your in-person obligations have reduced a lot. I think the part is really being aware of what the possibilities are. Like, let's say we had parents who were elderly or ill and they needed us. We wouldn't have done this. But all of a sudden, the ties to what we may have needed to take care of were disappearing. And you'd be it would kind of be criminal if you didn't take advantage of it. So many people don't have the opportunity. So many of our friends have passed away way before they should have, and they would love to like latch onto an adventure and try something new. And they can't because they're not even alive anymore. So it just feels like if we hadn't done something different and tried to prolong and add excitement to our life, it would have been sort of irresponsible.
Right. And you just published a book. So let's just talk about that for a minute.
Oh,
The process of the book and just a little bit about the book.
well, thank you for mentioning it. It's called Daughter of a Promise. It came out this week, which is the first week of April. It is a modern retelling of a biblical love story. So, Daughter of a Promise is the literal translation of the name Bathsheba. And I've taken the story of David and Bathsheba and set it in a contemporary time and place, Wall Street in 2019. A young woman named Betsabe Ruiz, who's of Cuban descent, goes to a small upstate New York liberal arts college and kind of against all, against what anybody would have thought, she ends up on Wall Street in an investment banking training program. She had majored in theater and psychology, but she was a candidate for this job and got the job, and felt like she was treading water and barely staying her head above water, but studied really hard and worked really hard and became top of her class. So it's a love story between her and her very powerful boss named David, again, set in 2019. So as half of that year comes to a close, COVID hits. And then if you know the story of David and Bathsheba at all, um, quite a bit of crazy happenings and some tragedy and some loss. But ultimately, this young woman is broken open and gets like really understands the value she was raised with and the power that she has inside of her to kind of go forward and live a life that's one that's really authentic to herself. So I had such a great time writing this. Actually, I think I mentioned I wrote it a lot during COVID, and it was mainly just to keep me sane. But after I had a first draft finished, I applied to the Stony Brook um, writers program called Bookends, which is a year of mentorship where you really like rip the manuscript apart, put it back together again,
That's humbling
and
too.
polish it. Yeah. What?
That's very humbling too.
Totally humbling. Yeah, you have to be willing to just rewrite it and take a lot of advice and criticism from your peers and your faculty. So I came out of that program. I continued to work on the book for a little bit longer. And then I went back to the same publishing company that published Eden and the Nine. And yeah, so the book came out this week. Most of my work has allusions to biblical stories because I believe the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, is kind of a foundational piece of literature as well as being a religious text. It's an incredible piece of work, and I really love referring back to those stories and making them timeless and making them meaningful in our current time. So Eden, my first novel, was a reflection on paradise. The Nine was was launched from the story of Hannah and Samuel and a woman's faith in the world when she sets her son free at a very young age to go off, and in the 9 he goes to a boarding school and there's a scandal there and he has to navigate that, and it's about the mother-son relationship as the son's going through a really stressful time. And then with this book, Daughter of a Promise, it's the first time I've really taken the plot of a biblical story and created a contemporary parallel in a lot of ways. So I've adhered a lot to the plot of that story, but obviously changed the circumstances. And so I have I have minor characters in Eden who became major characters in Daughter of a Promise. And so the 3 books are somewhat related in that minor characters show up in all 3 of the novels. Major characters become minor characters in other books. I was inspired by Elizabeth Strout and her work after Olive Kitteridge, where some of the minor characters were getting full-on works of fiction of their own. And it's been so fun because I've been able to really expand this imaginary world, first with Eden in a beach town, then a New England boarding school with the 9, and now Wall Street, and all these worlds and microcosms of privilege. And I'm able to make kind of a commentary, I guess, on the ups and downs of these societal systems that have been in place and these traditions that have been in place for a long time. So anyway, I get a lot of joy out of my work.
Yeah, it sounds like fun to actually be thinking it out, like this intellectual fun. Different people have different definitions of fun, but it just seems like a fun way to like be thinking about. And the whole writing, novel writing is new to me. It's not something that I don't think that I've tried, but I find it fascinating to see how different people come up with such different ways of telling a story, and really, in some way, maybe even telling a little bit of your story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anybody who says their fiction is not autobiographical is just in denial. Every piece of art, everything we put out in the world has a little bit of us in it. I just use fiction so I can protect the innocent. But yeah, I get a lot of joy, and like you said, it's intellectual. There's like some richness, I think, in the biblical allusions. You don't have to be a reader who's well versed in any of the biblical stories to enjoy my work, but if you are, it gives an added bit of pleasure. It definitely gave me pleasure in writing, and I guess any work that I'm going to put my name on and put out in the world for eternity, I want it to be somewhat ambitious. I view my reader as a very intelligent person who enjoys also connecting all these dots with me. And nothing I get greater pleasure out of than talking about the work and making connections with people. The the biggest reward in this whole enterprise has been like receiving emails from readers or going to book clubs and have meaningful conversations with people. I really do try to hit on some of the like core familial angst that we all go through, whether it's a parent-child relationship or yeah, I won't go into all of it, but the topics my books hit on are pretty universal. The plots might be far-fetched, but the human element is pretty universal, and so they generally spark really important conversations.
So just in summary, you've really transformed your life in the last 10 years, and you're loving it. And I find that so inspiring.
Thank you. I feel so lucky. I feel like I've had the support to do it, but I also know that it took some courage, and I think everybody has that opportunity in any small way to create a new experiment, or a small experiment or a big experiment. And again, we only get one chance in life. And once you come to terms with that, I think that actually injects you with a lot of bravery.
Yeah. So bravery, the humility, all these things that are really important in midlife, and I think that it gives us a much richer midlife and beyond. So thank you so much, Jeanne.
Thanks for talking about these things with me. I love to share. I loved the conversation and sharing some of the thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me in another fascinating conversation about midlife. If you'd like to reach me, Devora Krasnianski, to talk about your midlife or anything else, you can reach me at jewishmidlife@gmail.com. You can also find us on our website, jewishmidlife.com, and follow us on Jewish Midlife on Instagram or Facebook, and join our conversations in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. And share what we're doing with your friends and others in the midlife phase.